A few lessons ago, we created a controller to handle our course content or the lecture contents, and that was called Instructor Lecture Content Controller. And in here, we had a function for handling file uploads, which we need to start working on now. One thing I remember, we haven't run the migration to create the video table yet, so we just have to run PHP artisan migrate, and we do have an error. We do have an error in the migration because we set a default value to the video upload process, but we are passing the entire enum, which in this case we should actually be passing the value of the enum and not the entire thing. So we just need to change the video uploaded enum and pull out the value from there. So if we go back here and just run a PHP artisan migrate, that should work, and our video table is created. All right, back to the controller here, where we have to upload the videos. We mentioned that one of the tricky things is that if we have heavy videos and you're uploading heavy videos to your system, you don't want users to sit there and wait for a 100 gigabyte or a 10 gigabyte or even a 100 megabyte video to upload to your server. We want to upload this in chunks, and there's a nice package here called Laravel Chunk Upload that handles the process of collecting the video chunks and saving it to a local system and then compiling them to a single upload file at the end of the day, which makes it really easy for us to handle the upload process like any other file upload. So here I'm going to install the package, and we will set up the controller method for handling the request as it comes in. So let's copy the require command, head over to VS Code and install the Laravel chunk upload package. And while that is installing, we can also just publish a configuration, which again, I'm not going to be changing, but we can just publish the configuration here. In fact, this package is so nice. The way I find the documentation is really detailed, and they even have an example of how to implement the upload process in Laravel. So they do have an example here with a sample control, I believe, that we can use to figure out how file uploads work in Laravel. So what we do in this controller will be very similar to the example that is provided in the documentation. So the first thing we need to do is set up what they call the file receiver, and that is coming from the package that we just installed. So receiver, and this is going to be responsible for receiving the chunks of files that are coming in from the upload. Again, remember that if we have 100 megabytes of file, it will be broken down into little pieces and sent to the server. So the receiver will be responsible for receiving these chunks. So we set a new file receiver, and file receiver is coming from the package we installed. So we need to pull in the namespace. So remember, from Python Laravel chunk upload receiver, we are pulling in the file receiver class there, and it takes the name of the file. So in this case, when we upload the file, we are going to call it file. It takes the request, and then we do have a handler class that we use, or that it uses to transform the request to an internal object that it can then use to handle the file chunks. Okay, so that class is called the handler factory, and in there, I'll pull it first, import that, and in there we call the class from request, and we pass in the request that is coming in from the users. Okay, so this is a simple function that basically takes the request, transforms it into an internal object for the chunk upload package to handle. All right, so now that we have a receiver, the next thing we want to do is to check if the upload is successful. If the upload for any given chunk is not successful, then we throw an exception to the client. So let's just say check if file successfully uploaded. So here we're going to say if the receiver is uploaded. So if it's not uploaded, so if any of the files is not uploaded, so we are negating that condition. Then we want to throw an exception that comes with the package. So throw new upload missing file exception. So we just throw an exception to say, hey, we are missing a file, and we pull that class in. Again, these classes are coming from the package that we installed. Now, if we have a file, then it means we can receive the chunk, okay? So we can receive the file from client. So, and that will be in the form of chunks. Equals receiver, and it has a receive method that handles the chunks, okay? So what happens here is this function takes the chunks and basically puts them in a temporary folder in our Laravel file system. And so it will just keep receiving each of the chunks as it's coming in. And that is what we're defining here, that receiver should receive the files and save them in our local file system. Okay, so you see this handler method here that says start saving, and it gets a chunk storage, which we just set here. If you go to the configuration that we published and you go to chunk upload, you see that by default the storage is set to local and the folder will be chunks. So we expect to see a chunks folder in our local file system when the chunks get uploaded. So once the files have been received, we can here then check if the upload has finished. So if it's received all the chunks, then we can proceed with just handling the upload like a normal upload process. So if chunks is finished, you can see how easy it is to use this package with the implementation. Otherwise, we'd have to manually get the chunks and do it ourselves and stitch them together, but this makes it really easy. So once we get the file, we need to save it somewhere and return a response to the user in the front end, right? So save the file and return a response to the front end. So in this case, we can move the file to a local disk or whatever we want to do with it. And in our case, we will create an action to handle the file upload for us. So here we'll just say response is equal to, let's create an action that will handle the file upload. So PA make action, and that will be in the lecture handle file upload action. And we're going to call that action here handle file upload action run. And to this action, we are going to pass the lecture, because here in the request, we are receiving the lecture that the video belongs to. So we're going to pass the lecture, and we are going to pass the chunks get file. So get file returns a single upload file in the form of Laravel's uploaded files type. And so it stitches all of the chunks together and gives us a single uploaded file. So we're going to pass that file over to our handler method here. Now, while we are here, when we have moved the file over, we still have some chunks or the temporary files stored in our local environment, right? So I want to try to unlink them or delete them from our file system, because, well, at this point, we've already handled the upload process and there's no reason to keep the chunk files in our local system. So here I'm going to wrap that in a try catch block. So if anything fails in the process of moving those files, then I don't want to store the whole process. So exception E, and in here, we just need to do an unlink of the chunks. So chunks get file, and we get the path name for the file. So that basically removes or deletes the whole thing. And if it fails, if for some reason it was not able to delete the file for whatever reason, then we want to just report the exception, of course, but we don't want to store the process, right? So in Laravel, if you want to handle or report an exception, you might want to log it somewhere in your log files or do something, but continue with processing the data and not stop the entire workflow. You can just do report of the exception. And so if you had your exceptions going to Sentry, or you're sending them to some other third-party listening software, then by reporting it, that exception gets reported to those external parties. But we can return false here to say, don't stop the entire workflow, just continue with the rest of the workflow. So that is it for handling the files. And at the bottom, when everything is done, we can just return response JSON, and that will be the response that we get from the file upload process in our action. So let's go to the file upload action and handle the upload process in there. In here, we said we are receiving the lecture and we are receiving the file, and the file that we get is in the form of a regular uploaded file in Laravel. So that is the data type for that is uploaded file, and we'll call that file. Okay. So what do we do with it from here? Well, it's very easy. We need to get the temporary disk that we are going to use to store our videos before they are being processed or converted to other formats. So I'm just going to pull that information here, temp disk, and that information is configured in our site, disks, videos, temp configuration. Then I also want to get the stream disk, so the disk that we're using to stream the videos, and that is also in the site, disks, videos, stream configuration parameter. I want to get the MIME type, and that is stored in the site extensions. If we go back to our configuration here, site, we are pulling all of that information from here. So site extension, we do have a configuration parameter called the stream MIME type. Okay, so that's what we are pulling in here. So MIME type would be site extensions, and we just need to call the stream MIME type configuration parameter. Now here we can move the video to a temporary directory. So path is file.store, and we are just using regular Laravel commands or functions here to store the file, and the file is going to be in a subdirectory that contains the ID of the lecture, and then the disk name will be temp disk. So we are moving the uploaded file to the temporary directory with the subfolder lecture ID. Okay, and then we want to get the name, so the original file name, and that is through the file get client original name. Now with this information, we can create a video record in the database, because at this point we don't have a record for the video in the database. And so we are going to create a record in the database that contains all of this information. So video equals lecture video create. Now at this point we are calling lecture video, but we have not yet put in a relationship between the lectures and the videos in the model. So I want to go to the lecture model. Let's look for the lecture model, and we specify the relationship of the lecture and the video. Okay, so if we go to the lecture model here, we can just do public function video, and that will just be return this, and it's going to be a has1 relationship. So at any given time, we can only have one video for the lecture. Okay, so, and remember that if it is a text lesson, then the lecture will not have a video. If it's a video lesson, then we will be able to pull the video out of this has1 relationship. We can come back to the action and simply create the video in the database. So what we need to put in is the original file name, and that is the name that we just got from here. Remember, we have the name here. We want to get a temp path, and that's where we are temporarily storing the video, and that is under the path, this path. We want the temp disk, and that is the temp disk, of course. We want the stream disk, and that is the stream disk. The MIME type, and that is MIME type. The processing percent, now at this point we just set it to 0 because we are not processing this video yet, and uploaded at, which is a timestamp, and we'll just set it to now. Okay, so we'll just create a video record with the initial data loaded in there. And now what we want to do is, if somebody tries to change the video for a particular lesson or lecture, we want to delete the previous video while we upload the new one. Just like we did in the cover image for a course, where we want to only have one cover image at a time. And so if you're uploading a new cover image, we delete the old one and upload the new one, okay? So to do that, we did make use of the tab function, and so we're going to do the same thing here. So let's just say return tab, and the tab function takes the lecture video, so the current video that may be existing for the lecture, and then the function, and the function takes the current video, which we will call previous, and in here we want to use the file that is being uploaded, so use the file and also use the lecture, okay? And we're going to wrap everything in here in our tab function. Let's just quickly indent that here, and everything will be wrapped in the tab function, and we can close this, okay? Which means that while we do the upload process for our video, we have access to the previous video that may be existing. And so right here, once we create the new video, we can delete the previous video if it exists. And we can do that by just doing previous and delete. We did have a null safety here, so that if we don't find any previous video, we will not call the delete method. Otherwise, just call the delete method. So this is the same as just saying if previous, then previous delete. So these two are more or less the same thing, okay? In this case, we just use the shorthand, use the null safety in PHP 8, and delete the video if it exists. Now, if we upload the new video, at this point, we also want to update the lecture and set the type to video, because at this point, maybe the lecture was originally a text lecture, but we want to change the type to a video because that is what the new video indicates. And we will also be setting the body of the lecture to null, okay? So if any content was already written there for text lectures and we're uploading a video, we want to set the text content to null. So let's do lecture, update, and in the update, we just need to say type is equal to lecture type, with getting that from our enum, and video. And then the body of that lecture should be set to null. Okay, so we no longer have a body, now we have a lecture. And in this closure, we can return. Remember that we are doing tab here, so whatever we return here is whatever we return in this closure is what will be returned to the controller that is calling the this action. So within this closure, we need to do a return, and we want to return the path where the temporary video is stored, and that is going to be the path. We want to return the name of the file and the MIME type. Whatever we need to do with it in the front end, we can then do that. But let's return that information to the client, and they can then use it for anything that they wish. Okay. When we come back in the next video, we'll try to upload a video just to see that this process works. But one thing that we'll do after that is to also dispatch a job here, because at this point the video is just living and sitting in our temporary disk, but we want to dispatch a job to process the video. And we are going to be looking at that in the next few lessons.